Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I'm Tia Graham, and if this is your first time tuning in this week on a Wednesday, our guest host is Orlando Bailey, the Executive Director of Outlier Media. Thank you for being here with us this week.
It's been an honor and a pleasure to sit aside from you, Tia, every single day this week. It's been fun.
It's fun. It's a fun time. It's fast-paced, but it is a fun time.
It is. It is very fast-paced. And speaking of fast-paced, let's get right to it. Today on the program, whether it's automotive insurance or rent, Detroit is not affordable for many residents. We'll talk about what that means for the people of this city and how it can be changed with Outlier reporter SaMaya Overall.
Plus, Grammy-nominated artist Mumu Fresh will be playing today at the Bridge Center in Detroit. We'll talk with her about that as well as the inspirations for her music.
Yes, let's do it. On the last day of July, Michigan's Supreme Court had a big ruling. It declared that a previous state legislator had obstructed the will of the people and watered down a proposal that, if passed, would have increased the state's minimum wage. Now, Michigan's minimum wage is set to increase by $2 in February and then each subsequent year through 2029. To discuss the implications of the ruling and how people are reacting to it, we have Jordan Hermione here. She is a reporter at Bridge, Michigan, and has been writing about this topic. Jordan, thanks for joining us here on the Metro.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
It's good to hear your voice. Jordan and I are old colleagues when I worked at Bridge, Detroit. Jordan, let's talk about this. What does the ruling from the Michigan Supreme Court change about Michigan's minimum wage, and how big of a deal is this change?
Yeah, so, as you pointed out, this has been a long time in the making. Honestly, it goes all the way back to 2018, where a group known as One Fair Wage sought to allow voters to decide on raising Michigan's minimum wage to just over $13 an hour and tipped worker wages to just under $12 an hour by 2023. But that didn't end up actually happening. As you pointed out, the Republican-led Michigan legislature at the time instead adopted the bills and pretty much neutered them and cut them down from what they were supposed to do to a completely different sort of setup. That was taken to the Supreme Court, which, I guess backing up, it went all the way through the court system. Court of Claims judge ruled that the policy was unconstitutional. Court of Appeals said it was constitutional. The Supreme Court disagreed. So, over the summer, we finally have an end to this, I think, 6-year-long saga now, which basically means that the Wage Act and Earned Sick Time Act will go into effect February 21st of 2025. If no other action is taken by the state legislature. So Michigan's current minimum wage law puts minimum wage at $10.33 per hour, with tipped workers working for $3.93 per hour. So we have a little bit higher of a minimum wage for non-tipped workers than the federal minimum wage, which is $7.25. And as you pointed out, next year it could go up and, adjust for inflation should the legislature decide to do anything about that. And that's kind of where we're at currently with respect to the kind of confusion, frankly, that's come out of this court case. Business owners, restaurant owners, they are a little bit concerned with what this means for them, especially smaller businesses. And meanwhile, the legislature is being a bit tight-lipped at the moment. Governor Gretchen Whitmer said earlier this month that she didn't actually know if the ruling needed to be immediately addressed, but other state lawmakers have said that it does need to, and that we are reviewing our options. Whitmer, for what it's worth, has also said that the state is reviewing its options, but what those options are or what that could entail, no one's really saying at this point.
So the decision is a bit wonky for those policy nerds, and if your head is spinning, we're going to try to break it down for everybody who's listening. The minimum wage is set to continue to increase. Tell us what the mechanism that will be used to do that. An inflation calculator, how will they do that up until 2029?
Yeah, so like you said, it's pretty much that. Depending on inflation calculations made by the state, the minimum wage will likely climb above $12 next year and just continue to rise as is. But those figures are not yet confirmed by the state. The Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity is still reviewing the court's decision, and it's not honestly quite clear how high the minimum wage could potentially go. And that's because the $10 starting wage that the ballot initiative called for in 2019 is actually no longer worth $12. And the court is requiring the state treasury to adjust the rate based on inflation. And the ruling does also require that additional increases for future years. So, we're kind of in this holding period right now that, like I said earlier, there's still a lot of questions that are left unanswered. And that even holds true for how high minimum wage could potentially climb under this decision.
If you are just tuning in and listening, we're talking with Jordan Hermione of Bridge, Michigan. We're discussing a state Supreme Court ruling that is set to change Michigan's minimum wage, and just listening a little bit about some of the things that you and Orlando were just discussing, the mechanism and that calculator, the inflation calculator. And you're saying right now we're not really sure where that mark is going to end. So what are you seeing in terms of legislation and the movement right now in the state of Michigan? What we're going to see a cap anytime soon, if we're going to see a cap anytime?
So for what it's worth, the state legislature is still on its traditional summer vacation. And from my understanding, they're not set to return unless called back earlier than September 11th. In speaking with Democratic leaders, because Democrats control both the House and the Senate in this current political cycle, like I said before, they're being pretty tight-lipped. From what I'm hearing from spokespeople, the phrase "we're reviewing our options" has been said many, many times. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But I'm hearing from, though, there are certain Democrats, for what it's worth. Noah Arbit, who's a Democrat out of the House, West Bloomfield. He has been, one of the first, honestly, that I've seen to come out extremely vocally in support of making some kind of change to this decision. Because in the meantime, you're having individuals like the head of the Small Business Association and the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association saying that this ruling is tone deaf and that it's going to be, in Justin Winslow's own words, who's the president and CEO of the Restaurant and Lodging Association, he called it a likely existential blow to Michigan's restaurant industry when the ruling first came down last month.
Yeah, we interviewed Brian Calley yesterday and had a similar conversation, especially around the paid sick leave. But I want to talk to you about the people who are most affected by this change, right? And we're talking about, is it most service workers? Is it restaurant workers or those who get tips? And can you talk to me also a little bit about the narrative of the opposition of this ruling? Because I for the life of me, I remember just 4 years ago in 2020, the people that are going to be most affected by this ruling were, as we were calling them, essential workers and the backbone of keeping America going and safe.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with opposition. The argument that I'm hearing is somewhat multifold. I'm hearing from groups that represent tipped workers saying that tipped workers in certain industries actually have the ability to make far greater than the wage that would go into effect under this ruling. The claims that there are certain, for instance, servers or bartenders who can make up to allegedly $30 an hour, at least when broken down, accounting for the number of tips that they make. Again, with opposition, as you mentioned, Brian Calley of the Small Business Association and the Michigan Restaurant and Lodging Association, they're saying that there's just not the ability for businesses to pivot this quickly and raise their wages to what is being called for. And there's also a big caveat here that the ruling that came down didn't just deal with minimum wage. It actually makes amendment to the sick leave portion, sick leave that is required for businesses to give to their employees. So effectively under that, it would affect all employers with one or more employees, allowing for up to 72 hours of sick leave a year to be accrued. And I'm hearing from folks that, especially in smaller businesses, this would mean that they have to hire out HR firms and sort of get the ball rolling on that, which if there isn't any clarity as to whether or not this ruling is going to take effect as is, for instance, if the legislature is going to step in later this year, that could be a lot of work that small businesses start to put into motion, but then maybe don't even have to do as much, but they might have already paid to hire an HR firm, for instance. So, it's a little bit of back and forth because obviously then you have the group One Fair Wage who, as you pointed out, they say that this is a huge win for tipped employees, for individuals who make below minimum wage. In a statement that came out right upon the ruling, the group actually said that they've prevailed over corporate interests, and that they are on the road to ensuring that restaurant workers and all workers are being paid a full fair wage with tips on top. So,
and that's different. A fair wage or a livable wage, Jordan, is different from a minimum wage, right? And I think I think we have to name sort of that complexity and nuance within the conversation, because there are people in the state of Michigan, especially here in the city of Detroit, who are working full time, 40 hours plus a week jobs, making minimum wage. Right. And that's still not a livable wage where they're able to not be housing insecure or transportation insecure or, all of those things.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's a great point. I mean, I go back to the federal minimum wage is $7.25, and if an individual is making that much, they top out at just above the federal poverty line. Michigan's only a couple dollars higher than that, which means that if you are making minimum wage, as is in the state, yes, you're entirely right. It is not necessarily a livable wage, which is why the Group 1 fair wage is they're part of that effort too, to push to $15 an hour. I know was a movement that took place back when this court decision was the ballot petition actually was making its way up through the ranks. Now, though, to your point, I mean, $15 back then seemed like that was maybe the livable wage to shoot for. But yeah, it's been 6 years, so all of these figures, frankly, do need to be reevaluated.
Yeah, Jordan, we're out of time. We want to thank you so much for coming on. Jordan Hermany, that's what he's trying to say, is a reporter at Bridge, Michigan. Jordan, thanks for joining us on the Metro.
Of course, anytime.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham. Orlando Bailey, the executive director of Outlier Media, is here. And the forecast today, Thursday, sunny, a high of 78 degrees expected. Tomorrow, actually, today is Wednesday. Orlando, today is Wednesday. Today is not Thursday.
It's hump day.
All right. Well, today on this Wednesday, it's 73 degrees is a high. Tomorrow, Thursday, expect sunny skies at 78. Friday, mostly sunny, a high of 80. The weekend, we're going to see mid to upper 80s both Saturday and Sunday. No rain expected. So looking pretty good this weekend on a hump day. It's a hump day.
It's hump day, so I get it, right? In the news, a man dies after a struggle with Northland Center guards. A witness says a man who died during a struggle with security guards at Northland Center repeatedly said he couldn't breathe. Hoy Monk II testified that 3 guards wouldn't let up on Mackenzie Cochran, who died. All 3 are charged with involuntary manslaughter. Their lawyers say Cochran was a threat and refused to leave the mall after a tense encounter with a jewelry store owner. So unfortunate on all counts there. So we're going to keep it. Yeah, we're going to keep our ears to the pavement on that.
For sure. And then just moving forward, coming up on the show, whether it's auto insurance or rent, Detroit is not affordable for many residents. We'll talk about what that means for people and how it could be more affordable with Outlier reporter SaMaya Overall. You all stay right there.
New from the Embedded podcast. Female athletes have always needed grit and talent. But for decades, they've also needed a certificate.
There was chit-chat about, is that really a woman?
And even now, they're still being checked and questioned. Their story is the newest series from CBC and NPR's Embedded. It's called Tested. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to the Metro. I am Tia Graham here with the executive director of Outlier Media, Orlando Bailey.
Hey, y'all.
Orlando. I mean, this music, the way it came in, it felt like a little 90s hip hop-ish.
Yeah,
like
I'm
Martin,
bopping over here.
Living single.
Let's go. Let's meet at Nipsey's after this.
See. Oh.
Y'all should see her. She's crying over here,
Seriously.
y'all.
So, oh my gosh. Okay. All of you over at Outlier, okay, the series that you have, affordability series that you all have.
Affording Detroit is what we call it.
It's absolutely fantastic to go through it and truly feel seen as a young Detroiter in the city of Detroit. I consider myself younger. Yeah. Younger Detroiter in the city right now who can barely afford to live in her city that she was born and raised in. So it's like seeing this series makes me feel seen, understood, and hopefully some change that'll come out of this series that's of reporting to let people know what we're really experiencing out here. Because like you were saying in that last segment, we're working 40-hour, jobs. A lot of us, and it's still tough. So it's just this misconception that it's super easy to live in Detroit.
Wow. Number one, Tia, thank you so much for that feedback. We're going to make sure that we record that. I also want to say that as executive director of Outlier Media, it is a pleasure to help introduce this series, and SaMaya Overall, who is my colleague. There's this misconception, everybody, that Detroit is cheap and affordable for most people. That's simply not the case. Even in my position, I can barely afford to live in the city I was born in.
That's me.
And to do a full-time job, right? So Outlier Media, an online publication and partner of WDET, has a new series titled Affording Detroit. The series examines all the ways Detroiters struggle to make ends meet. We've covered one of the stories on the Metro already when we spoke with Outlier reporter Kobe Levin about the costly burdens of automotive insurance. Joining us now to talk more about the Affording Detroit series from Outlier Media, my colleague, SaMaya Overall. SaMaya, welcome to the Metro.
I'm so excited to be here. Hi, Orlando. Hi, Tia.
Hello. Orlando, before we get started, you said automotive insurance. You turned into a different automotive insurance.
You know why I turned into a different person? Because that deposit that leaves my bank account every month for automotive insurance in the city of Detroit makes me upset all over again. And so I probably turned into Barry White or Billy D. Williams or something when I talked about it, because I wanted to emphasize that it is burdensome. It is really cost burdensome. But Outlier has been doing these surveys, and the surveys talk, a lot about, and I know they speak to Tia about how the surveys we've conducted at Outlier and how it informs our reporting. Talk about that process.
Yeah, when this project was starting way back in December, when I was trying to figure out, the city again after coming back from college, I was talking to these professionals about affordability in Detroit, but we weren't hearing from the people paying the bills, the everyday people who are struggling to live in the city, and with some help from Outliers, Kate, Abby Lamberts, and Sarah Hewlett, we were able to create a survey and send it out to people, and the responses we got were just so real, so enlightening. They were able to tell us, people are just fed up with having to struggle while working, like you said, 40 hours a week and doing their jobs and having jobs and still not able
Robbing
to
Peter to pay Paul.
Exactly. That was a very
and it's a real thing, isn't it? It's a proverb.
It is.
Let's talk about some of what we heard in those surveys. Sort of bring to our listeners some of the most alarming things you learned about affordability in Detroit.
Yeah, there were a lot of different things. We have a story about childcare coming out tomorrow, but one really alarming statistic is that Detroiters are paying between 23 and 31% in childcare alone, and that is the equivalent to what they're asking people to pay in rent, and you're paying that in childcare, and just how you're expected to get ahead. But what was really interesting is the story that I wrote with Kobe Levin about transportation. I got on a couple buses just to talk to people who ride buses, and it was my first time riding a bus in the city, and a lot of them
got on that iron pimp.
Yes,
that's what we used to call it.
Exactly. And I was asking, what time does the bus usually come? And they were just kind of laughing. And
because there is no
time. And I was like, that has to be included in the story. Like, people were just like, it comes when it comes. You wait here and you hopefully see a green bus.
Which is really sad to even think about, that you're depending on that transportation for work or going to school or whatever it may be. The bus doesn't show up. One of the previous conversations we had was the bus didn't show up for a kid to go to school, so he just went back home. And that's
Yeah.
how chronic absenteeism is really
Right.
on the rise.
It's the thing.
One of the things,
It's
public
the thing.
transit.
Yeah, public transit. And you talked about the high cost of childcare, which is so prohibitive to so many people. And I was also thinking about the low wages that the workers within the childcare system gets, which is so uneven, right? And we know
Exactly.
that in the state of Michigan, the primary workforce for childcare facilities are women, Black women. Talk about how Outlier chooses the topics to research and highlight.
Yeah, I mean, part of it just comes from the way that Outlier is built around. We cover the issues of housing, we cover the issues of utility and transportation. That's ingrained in who Outlier is, and that was where we started. But then, there are these other costs. There are the child care costs. There are the opportunity costs from transportation that are different from the expensive car insurance payments you were referring to, Orlando. And so we were kind of just trying to find those different pain points for people, and the survey really helped that and kind of confirmed that we were on the right track, that these are the things that people are just struggling with day to day, and it's truly just figure out what you can do. And that's the way that most people were responding to the survey.
SaMaya, just really quickly, you said that you just got back from school. You just came back. Are you from the city?
So I'm from Downriver.
All right.
I was in E-course for most of my life, and then graduated from Wyandotte.
Alrighty then. So going to school and then coming back to this area, you had a little time to kind of get away. What was it like coming back and trying to kind of seeing those price increases, the inflation in the city, and just trying to figure out where you're going to end up and land with the prices the way they are right now?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it was a totally different city than what I left. I mean, partially the fact that I left as an 18-year-old, came back as a 21-year-old might have done a part, but also just like when you are looking at rent and you're like, oh, my salary won't pay that, or oh, I can't afford to have my car housed here because insurance is too high. It kind of just pushes you out to the suburbs. And I love this city, and I love the events and the things that you can do in this city, but I had to kind of make a financial choice. So I live in Livonia now, and I wouldn't think that it would be cheaper, but like when you kind of compare them side by side, it is, and it's what I had to do. And I wish I was here in the city meeting people, meeting and being able to see people more organically instead of making it a trek 30 minutes up the construction of I-96, which is a whole other conversation, and getting here.
If you're just listening in, we're speaking with SaMaya Overall, a reporter with Outlier Media. We're talking about why it's so expensive for many people to live in the city of Detroit. So the survey sort of highlights Detroiters are skipping necessities and bill payments and still can't make ends meet. What were some of the responses, and how are struggling Detroiters making it work?
So we touched on one. It was robbing Peter to pay Paul. I mean, a lot of people were like, I pay my rent, I pay my utilities and the other things. If I have it, I pay it. If I don't, I don't. It was really which bill collector is going to knock on my door and which one I need to keep off at bay. And it's a really actually sad reality when you think about it. But a lot of people also highlighted community resources. The resources that Detroiters are giving to each other were really important to a lot of our survey respondents, and it was really interesting to hear how it's not the federal assistance, it's not the those type of assistance like formal assistance programs, but like the way that communities are just kind of gathering together to build this safety net with the little that they had.
The other thing that this series is doing is combating especially the national narrative that Detroit is such an affordable place to live. And, Outlier sort of did the work to, come up with this affordability formula based upon what? Right? The median income of the average of Detroiters, right? And we juxtapose that to automotive insurance rate, living expenses, and what did we find?
That it's not.
It's not.
Simple as that.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not even close. When you look at the median income, it's some, $36,000 or so dollars. And when you even just take the recommended federal recommendations of percentage for housing and utilities, you get over that income very quickly, especially if you go month to month. And that's what people said. Almost a quarter of our respondents said that they didn't meet their bills for half of the month. Half of the year, and that says a lot.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really, really does. And SaMaya, one of the most recent stories that I was reading that you put out was about the food waste at Eastern Market. I just wanted to get into one of those other stories in the series because it was one of the things, once again, a lot of us don't think about highlighting food waste or just waste in general, what it does to the city, what it does to those around us, regardless. What were some of the things that you were finding out about the food waste that was happening at Eastern Market, and why was it so important to highlight it?
Yeah, it was interesting. That story came from Nina over at Planet Detroit,
Yeah.
and it was interesting to see how expensive it is to waste food.
Yeah.
Kind of counterintuitive in a sense, at least for me. But what was really interesting is that it doesn't come from a lack of trying from Eastern Market. They've had a lot of different techniques that they've tried to reduce this, but it's just at the end of the day, when you have that many vendors, like, you just have this issue. And I'm interested to see kind of what changes happen in the future and what partnerships with organizations where they can reuse some of that food and hopefully reduce that food waste.
Oh, well, I would love to continue that conversation about Eastern Market food waste. Maybe get Patrice Brown, who is the Associate Director of Agriculture at the City of Detroit. Maybe see if we can talk to her and see what we can do to get that going. But thank you so much for that. And then before we let you go, in the series, you also tackle a little bit about transportation. We talked about that as well. I just wanted to talk about the other thing that you brought up was tomorrow's story, the child care story. And if you could give us a few bullet points so we can kind of have a preview of what we're getting into, because I'm really interested to know. I don't have a kid. I'm not a parent. I'm an auntie for life. And
She's good for life.
For the most part, my name is Tia, Spanish for auntie. So just give us a little preview on that if you can.
20 seconds or less.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So that story written by Laura Herberg, yes, it's coming out tomorrow. We just kind of analyze kind of those costs that come with childcare because, it's either between you drop them off at a relative's house and you still have to kind of pay at least for their food. We don't have it like that.
Yeah.
Or you got to go to a more formal childcare facility, and those are just very expensive. And Detroiters are just spending quite a bit of their income on those costs, but it's a necessity if you're going to work during the day to have somewhere for your kids to go, especially during the summer. And so we're kind of looking at those ins and outs about that.
SaMaya Overall is a reporter with Outlier Media. SaMaya, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so
on
much
the Metro.
for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. And Orlando, we do have another conversation that's coming up next.
Yeah, coming up, we'll talk about a police precinct opening in Detroit and what community policing looks like in the city. We'll be right back.
It's the Metro on 101.9 WDET FM. I am Tia Graham, and I am here with the Executive Director of Outlier Media, Orlando Bailey.
What up, though?
Orlando. We were talking just a little bit earlier when we were prepping for the show about community policing.
Yeah.
We're both native Detroiters, and for me growing up, I did see police officers in my neighborhood who lived there and who were in the community.
And in my schools.
And in the schools. So when something happened in the neighborhood, the police officer will come out, honestly, in his pajamas almost, break up the little scruffle, break up the scrimmage, and then just go right back in the house.
Scrimmage.
Whatever is happening, he would just walk out and do it. And I just remember seeing that, and then we didn't.
We didn't anymore.
Yeah. So what does community policing look like, especially today? Is it simply the police being nice to kids, or is it a more coordinated effort to interact with residents in a particular way when officers are not directly called to a scene? Detroit hopes to take the latter approach with its opening of the 8th Precinct Community Annex. Opened by the city and the Detroit Police Department, Annex will serve as the 8th Precinct's headquarters for neighborhood police officers and will be a space for community events, meetings, and more. To chat more about community policing, Annex, and how this is meant to improve police relations in Detroit, we're joined by Detroit City Council President Pro Tem James Tate. who helped open the space. Pro Tem James Tate, welcome to the Metro.
Good morning. Can I give a what up though as well?
Yeah.
All right. What up though?
What up, though?
What up though?
And I always ask Detroiters, what part of Detroit you from?
West Side. Born and raised.
So
Same.
an additional demonstration of East Side, West Side diplomacy.
Yeah,
Unity.
That's it.
Unity.
That's it.
And just going straight into it, for folks who don't know, what are NPOs or neighborhood police officers? What's their role?
So neighborhood police officers is the city of Detroit's attempt to do community policing on a different level, having police officers that are familiar with a particular area, assigned with a particular area, but not available for emergency services. So these are the officers that you call about the non-emergency related issues. And they have cell numbers that are provided to the members of the community, have, again, defined locations that they are assigned to really connect with the people who live in that community, whether we talk about the businesses or the residents. That's their role.
Yes. And I honestly do believe I had experience with neighborhood police officers recently, actually, because they responded to a threatening situation. So, I think I did just have a recent experience, and it was a good experience. It was. So, as a former police officer yourself, can you tell me your experience and why this new community location is important for Detroit residents?
So I always preface that by saying I was not a sworn police officer.
Okay, all right.
I was a civilian who worked in the police department. So my background is in communications,
All right.
and they brought me on to work in the Office of Public Information. And that's where I served for 5 years, but had an opportunity to do so alongside many men and women who did make that sacrifice in their life to put themselves before danger, and had an opportunity to see that. I joined the police department at that time. It was 2005, I believe it was, and the city was in a different position than it is currently today. So we didn't have neighborhood police officers. So when you talk about that time when at one point you had neighborhood or police officers, community police officers, then they disappeared. That was that time frame, and so we were struggling just to close cases, struggling to keep police vehicles on the road, and unfortunately trolling down the drain towards bankruptcy. That happened. We had an opportunity to restructure our debt, gave us a new breath of life, and gave us a chance to really rethink how we do policing, as opposed to just doing the bare minimum, now going above that and providing connectivity to and true community relations with the folks in the community. So we don't have the blue pigs anymore. Those are the folks who, officers who would go out to the schools and play instruments, and that was one of the units.
I don't know if y'all remember BTB in the schools.
No.
Yeah, that was the program at Remus Robinson Middle School where I went on the Lower East Side. That brought a community police officer.
So you remember them?
I remember.
Yeah. So we don't have them anymore.
And Safe Night. I'm
sure.
dating myself. Council President Pro Tem, can you go into some of the community feedback when putting this project together? First, what was the mechanism for community engagement that you guys use, and what did the community have to say about it?
So we're talking about the building. Let me take us back. This is post bankruptcy at this point. And we are now looking at, prior to bankruptcy, we had combined many of our precincts and turned them to districts. So first and second, they would be one particular precinct or district, and so on and so forth. But again, post bankruptcy, we had an opportunity to do things differently. So we created the 8th precinct, technically right across the street where the former was. Some of you may remember Grand River and McNichols, where Redford High School was. Redford High School was leveled, unfortunately. But what sprung about was a Meijer store that has provided us who live in the area an opportunity for employment, as well as human dignity. Now we have an opportunity to get groceries in our neighborhood. Ooh,
I know.
Oh my goodness.
While fighting with those bike lanes over there.
Well, I love the bike lanes. We'll talk about that another day. Go ahead. We got to do better, though. We do have to do better.
I almost tore my tire up hitting a curb over there.
I'm sorry. We digress. Please continue, Council President Pro Tem.
So that the building now, the annex that we just had the ribbon cutting on a few weeks ago, was actually slated for demolition. And I looked at the structure, and I'm like, why are we demolishing this perfectly good building? It was built in 1925 and was designed to be the first township hall for Redford, and that was a year before that portion of the city was annexed to the city of Detroit. So that was Redford. It then became the first Redford branch library of the Detroit library system, and it closed down in 1981 because it was too small. And it moved over, the library moved across the street. Well, I looked at this building. Why are we demolishing this beautiful architecturally a sound building for a parking lot? Makes no sense. Talked to the mayor. He came out and he said, yeah, it doesn't make sense at all. So we were able to save the building, but unfortunately it took us quite some time because in order to get folks' attention, I had to slap a historic designation on it, which really prevented them from demolishing, because I got a feeling that folks would have still tried to push to make that happen. But now that's not, and we've got an opportunity to have a space for the community to meet on a regular basis, an opportunity for the officers, those neighborhood police officers, because these precincts are bursting at the seams. Even though we have fewer officers now, they have more equipment, and trying to strategically place them in positions that make it worthwhile their time is challenging. So that's also going to be a space for neighborhood police officers to file reports, but also have meetings. And I was very surprised and honored at the ribbon cutting when the mayor announced that he was going to propose that the building was going to be named after me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And if you are just tuning in, we're chatting with Detroit City Council President Pro Tem James Tate.
That's the name of the building, too, right?
That's why exactly why I did that segue. We're discussing the opening of the 8th Precinct Community Annex on West McNichols Road. And, as well, thinking about living in the city, growing up in the city of Detroit, what are some of the things that you are looking forward to in terms of this particular space and other spaces that could follow housing neighborhood police officers?
Yeah, so I really don't want it just to be a place for meetings. I think that's cool, but it needs to be more than that. It needs to really be embraced by the community. So in that particular area, there is a huge arts and cultural community.
Yes, it is.
Down the street there, Artist Village, Lasser and Grand River. I love that place. And we have a number of other installments, arts alleys that are in that area. So for me, it is important for us to lean into that. So I'm looking for that to be a performance arts facility in addition to, of course, meeting space. What a lot of people don't know is that when we repurpose what is now the 8th Precinct, which again is right next door, it came with an auditorium that was rehabbed as well. That is highly underutilized. So being able to activate both of those spaces, again, I'm a communications major. That's my background. I'm looking at it from a different perspective than just let's have meetings. Let's really activate this space and make it pop in the neighborhood.
I sat on the 5th Precinct Community Relations Council for a long time when I was at Eastside Community Network. I worked there for almost a decade. And I would go to those monthly meetings, and there's a certain demographic of people that come to those meetings to interact with the captains and the police officers, and they're not young people, right? Yeah. And so most of us, we meet police on the worst day of our lives, usually. Or when we meet police, it turns into the worst day of our lives. Talk to me about how this is going to improve relations with community, right? Because especially folks on the younger side, because when I canvass, when I'm in these streets, people don't have nice things to say about their experience with police. And what are some of the benchmarks that you all will put in place to sort of measure that, right? And measure success?
Yeah, I think it's BS if anybody says that the building itself is going to change relations. This is all about the officers being intentional, the department being intentional about building upon what we've created over these last couple of years. And it's not just the NPOs that have to be more sensitive, more emotionally attached to the residents. It's also the beat officers. And you see that. I mean, and unfortunately, we may catch an officer on their bad day as well. And that reverberates within the community in terms of their reaction. So you're seeing more sensitivity training that's happening within the police department that addresses that particular issue. But there's also, again, I believe we have a police chief that is top notch. We have a police chief that actually cares about the community and not about his political ambitions. This is a police chief that has human rights at his heart. He was also the person who was in charge of ensuring that our consent agreements were effectuated properly during the time when the police department was under the federal consent agreement. So, I don't want to make it, appear as if just because we now have this building that things are magically going to change. It's still going to be a journey, a progression, an evolution from where we were to where we will be. But I think that we're making strides and having a space where we all can convene in a intentionally designed location to pull us together, I think is a good thing.
Yeah. Really quick, in probably under 30 seconds, talk to us a little bit about your Crown campaign and how is it going?
Yeah, Protect Your Crown, our mental health initiative that we have, our advocacy program, is going well. We are still seeking additional folks to participate. You can go to Google and type in Protect Your Crown Detroit, and the first link that will come up will be that confidential 19-question survey that we're asking folks to fill out. And from that information that the participants provides us, we will be able to better identify the resources that we need to help our residents.
Yeah, especially for police responding to mental health calls.
Yeah.
Exactly.
In particular.
Huge numbers.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Detroit City Council President Pro Tem James Tate, for joining us on the Metro this afternoon or this morning, and we would love to have you back.
I would love to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Coming up, Grammy-nominated artist Mumu Fresh will be playing today at the Bridge Center in Detroit. We'll talk with her about that as well as the inspirations for her music. Can't wait. We'll be right back.
WDET-FM. I'm Tia Graham here with the Executive Director of Outlier Media, Orlando Bailey.
Hey,
Orlando. We do have a really cool, interesting conversation coming up next with a Tiny Desk participant, but not just a Tiny Desk participant. We also have someone who's in politics.
Who's in politics?
She does both.
I know, and I nerd out about things like, I don't know, the United States State Department and diplomatic relations.
Which was so, when you said that, this is the cutest thing, man.
I am. You know, I'm a Marshall Memorial Fellow alum, and so this is my jam.
This is right. Yeah, this is right up your alley. So this is perfect timing to have this conversation on the Metro. We talk about politics on the show, and we talk about music on the show, and we are about to bring you a conversation about both. Maimouna Yusuf, aka Mumu Fresh, is a Grammy-nominated singer, songwriter, and MC. She's also the musical ambassador for the U.S. State Department, Orlando.
Yes, I love it.
Mumu is on her healing tour and is making a stop in Detroit tonight at the Bridge Center. The show starts at 6 p.m. Before we get into the conversation with Mumu Fresh, we're going to listen to her 2018 performance of the song Ink Pata on NPR's Tiny Desk Concert.
I am the daughter of freedom fighters and farmers, bootleggers and number runners, copper colored skin like clay, cooler than Indian summers, blooded by oracles and seers, water porters and healers, once were warriors, now killers and drug dealers. Mississippi, Choctaw and Creek, but raised in Baltimore, so my vernacular from the streets, we move carefully. My pack of wolves, they care for me prayerfully. You'll only lose a limb fooling with them. I am the product of a gypsy and a kingpin. I exist somewhere between Egypt and Sing Sing. Born to be a revolutionary since a wee thing. Rebellion in the memory of the memories I was drinking.
To talk now more about her concert tonight and what inspires her music is Mumu Fresh. Mumu, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you.
Oh, look, she's here live in the flesh.
In the
Listen,
flesh.
we couldn't get to the entire poem because we got Mumu Fresh here
it's like
with
10
us.
minutes.
You in here, and listen, she's so fancy. You can find Mumu's complete and amazing Tiny Desk concert at WDET.org. The poem ends with you saying a quote: "We are spiritual beings having a human experience, and nothing else is ever true." Can you break this? So deep, but can you break this down for us? I take it as a reminder that we are all trying to find answers and navigate the challenges in our lives, and we are all but vapor.
For sure. Like, we've created this construct here as humans, you know, all these different factions and groups and identities. But on a soul level, we are spiritual beings first and foremost and forever. That's the part that's eternal. All the identities we've constructed here in this temporary human form, they're going to dissolve and they won't matter in a very short period of time. When we leave this physical plane, we become energy. We go back into the great mother, the great mass. You know what I mean? And so that is the majority of what we are, the essence of what we are. We are that dark matter. We are God.
Cosmic
consciousness. That's what we are.
Yes.
And so,
But where does this consciousness come from? Who raised you?
I love it.
well, I know I was raised by giants. I'm not gonna hold you. No, my parents are pretty extraordinary, and they are very sovereign-minded, independent thinkers. They are historians and philosophers, and and they gangsters too. But they, I was homeschooled. I was homeschooled until 10th grade, so I got a chance to look at the world very differently. My mother definitely believed in what they call unschooling now, experiential learning. And it's different. It definitely shapes your mind in a different way. So as a small child, I listened to Wayne Dyer, like so many thought leaders who spoke about that kind of, who spoke about meditation and just how to know yourself, your real self, your higher self, and how to stay present more than you are in the past and the future, and what that does to the way you see the world and see yourself. And you're able to identify, okay, I'm here in this game, this particular reality, but there are multiple layers of reality that are happening and existing at the same time in different dimensions of consciousness. So, that's what I mean. Like we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Mumu, we got to be friends because I love me an esoteric conversation.
I was about to say, I can listen to you talk.
Existential, esoteric conversation.
I can listen to you talk this whole time about this. But you were recently named the musical ambassador for the U.S. State Department. How does storytelling and people sharing their own personal experience in America shape the work that you've been doing? One of the things that you said that really, really resonates with me every time I hear it is I'm a child of farmers. I'm a child, I think about my grandparents coming up from the South and bringing that knowledge here with them. So, talk about how this informs your storytelling.
For sure. My grandmother was a sharecropper as a child. My father's last name is Farmer, so I was playing on both of those things. But for one, so my grandmother, like I said, she's a sharecropper from Mississippi, but she's also indigenous. So I always had a very deep connection with earth and understanding that that's where you go for grounding. That's where you go for peace. And when I was homeschooled, that was a class credit. I could go help my grandmother in the garden. I could help her build a sweat lodge. I could, when we come into certain ceremonies, when you come into a certain age, we would do ceremonies out in the woods, in the ground. And so that was always a really important part, being connected to the earth. Planting, understanding herbs, understanding herbalism. Like I knew that I could identify plants at a very early age and know what they did for the body. So those things that was just like how I grew up, how I just started to understand humans are not better than a plant or better than an animal. Like, you know what I mean? We're just
sharing this earth.
Yes.
So how does one become the musical ambassador for the State Department?
Well, so I've been a member, a governor for the Recording Academy. And so they shared this opportunity with me that, I could apply to become an ambassador. And I did. And we got the gig. And so they wanted to send us to countries where they didn't have great relationships and use music to bridge the gap, to talk to the people. Now, I did let them know, hey, listen, these are my views. They do not represent the United States government. Are you ready to hear what I got to say? I don't want no problems, but let me let you know what's what, But in particular, we were going to countries where they were dumping women's bodies. There were mass femicides going on. And we wanted to talk about what is the value of a woman. A woman cannot be used as collateral damage for a deal gone bad. Someone's grandmother, decades and decades of wisdom, that culture carrier and culture keeper is more valuable than your beef with somebody. That's how we push our culture forward, how we, continue to carry that on. And so when I got to some of the countries, we went to countries where they didn't even want an American footprint to touch the soil, And I had to first come First, I would say I'm coming as an indigenous person, as a world citizen, a global citizen. I'm coming as a heart and a spirit and a mind. And let me just talk to you about the women that I know. I want to talk to you about my grandmother first before we start talking about politics and America versus your. I just want to talk to you about my grandmother.
Yep.
Do you have a grandmother?
Yeah.
You know, and we start there, and the connection, it was instant. You know.
So yeah, thank you. You know, unfortunately, we run out of time. I wish we could talk to you for this whole hour, Mumu Fresh. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro. The concert is happening tonight. If you are interested, at the Bridge Center, it starts at 6 p.m. The Healing Tour. Thank you so much for being here. That is the Metro 101.9 WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio. Your connection to news, music, and conversation.